What's up, guys? I'm Devin Harrington, the average Gen Xer, and welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I thank you so much for stopping by. You know I would love it if you would subscribe, like, leave a comment on this video. I'm just really appreciative that you are here. So on this channel, I talk about a few different topics, and one of the topics I talk about is sharing tips and tricks for self-love and accomplishing goals, things that I have found helpful. Or as the kids say these days, life hacks. And today, the life hack that I'm going to tell you about is the 5 things I did to finish and publish my autobiographical novel. So, have you ever thought you should write a book about your life or a part of your life? Have you ever wanted to write a memoir? Have you ever wished you could tell your story to help other people, or just to write it to use that as a cathartic experience in your own life? As the old A&E biography show slogan goes, every life tells a story, and it really is true. Everyone has a story to tell. Doesn't matter your background or any socioeconomic factors. Everyone has a story to tell. According to a quick Google search, approximately 81% of people in America say they want to write a book. 81% say they wish they could write a book. Of those 81%, 15% of those actually start writing their book. 6% make it to the halfway mark. 3% of those people finish the book they started. And then of those 3%, approximately 0.6% publish. I'm not sure if that's traditional publishing or self-publishing, but it doesn't matter. The point is that many people want to write a book. Few people actually go through with it. And just to give you a little bit of background on me, I heard the expression, the great American novel, when I was a kid. And I just always thought that, I don't know, that was such a romantic idea, a romantic ideal to aspire to write the great American novel. I grew up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and Lawrence's sister city just up the river is Lowell, Massachusetts. Lowell happens to be the hometown of one Jack Kerouac. You may have heard of him. He wrote a little novel called On the Road, which to my mind is the great American novel. It's a coming of age story that has become kind of a rite of passage for restless teens and younger people to read. And if anyone doesn't know, Kerouac basically wrote about a long, strange road trip he took along America's burgeoning highway system with friends in the 1950s. And so he took this story from his life, changed the names of the people, probably took some creative license, made himself cooler than he actually was. And he wrote a story that took hold of readers because of Kerouac's masterfully descriptive writing that could really make readers feel what Kerouac was feeling in the moments he describes in the book. So let me say yes. I realize On the Road is kind of an obvious choice for me to be inspired by. It's a very famous book. You know, everyone's heard of it. It really is the quintessential great American novel. But I am the average Gen Xer, so what do you expect? Here is probably the most famous quote from the novel. You can get it on posters and t-shirts and stuff, but try to imagine, or maybe you lived this actually, because many Americans have read On the Road when they're young or older, whatever. But try to imagine being restless and young and burning to escape where you live, where you grew up, and then reading this. The only people for me are the mad ones, the ones who are mad to live, mad to talk, mad to be saved, desirous of everything at the same time, The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but burn, burn, burn like fabulous yellow Roman candles exploding like spiders across the stars. So, On the Road was written in 1957. It would probably seem pretty tame nowadays, but you have to remember in 1957 it was pretty culturally shocking with its depictions of drug use and casual sex and such. And all of that is to say that I was quite influenced while growing up by the mystique of On the Road and the fact that its author is from the same part of the country as I am. And Kerouac does really have quite a presence in Lowell, Mass. So he's buried there. I've been to his grave. There are still bars open in Lowell that were open back in his day, where he used to be a regular at these bars. One of them is called the Worthen, and I've been there. It's most famous for its belt ceiling fan system. Supposedly, urban legend has it that somewhere in the Worthen, Jack Kerouac left some graffiti on a table or something, but I was never able to find it. So the point is, I grew up with this idea stuck in my head of wanting to write an autobiographical novel someday, because that's what Kerouac did. He took, experiences from his life and he changed names and, made composite characters, but he wrote these beautiful novels from his life experience. And of course, they always say, write what you know. So I read On the Road for the first time, or at least parts of it, when I was in my teens. We did not study it in high school, but I remember reading bits and pieces of it in my teens. And then I went through my late teens and early 20s in the Gen X grunge days. And like so many of my Gen X peers, I was a giant mess. It was all the Gen X tropes you can think of, running around with a crowd of misfit punk kids, snorting dope off the Nevermind CD case, flannel, baby doll dresses, so many freaking Doc Martens, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. It was a moment in time. And when I escaped that world and made it to my mid 20s, I decided that writing my story would be therapeutic for me. And so I actually originally had the idea to use some experiences from that chaotic time in my life to write some monologues, because I was fresh out of acting school and a lot of actors write their own monologues. So that was like the germ of the idea. I was going to write monologues from my experience. But over the course of 15 years, yes, I said 15 years, it turned into this. It turned into this, and I realized the camera is mirrored, but this is my autobiographical novel published in 2011, self-published in 2011. I'll get to that in a minute. It's called The Iron Horse, a novel. It's available on Amazon in all formats. Shameless plug. Full disclosure, this is written under my real name, which is Dawn Erin. I always wished that I had a classy name like Devin Harrington, so I had to start a YouTube channel so I could be Devin Harrington. It takes what it takes. So it was 15 years from the day I picked up a notebook and started scribbling until I self-published in 2011. That was 1997 or 8 to 2011. I mean, you can imagine how much the world changed in those years. But it doesn't matter how long it takes. If you have a burning desire to write your story, whether you want to publish it, you want to leave it behind for your children to know you or your loved ones to know you after you pass, for whatever reason, even if you just want to put your childhood trauma down on paper and make it into a story, you can write your story. There is no magic writing dust that traditionally published authors have. The things that get picked up by a traditional publisher are really just random. It's actually a science, like what kind of books get published these days. It's a mess. So if you want to write a book, write your book. You can do it. And here are the 5 things that got me to finish my book and self-publish it. And this can certainly apply to anyone who wants to write a book about anything. If you want to write a how-to book on ice skating, whatever it is. But in my case, I'm telling my story as someone who wrote a novel, fictionalized autobiography based on my own life. So, step 1, start. I know this sounds stupid, but just get a notebook, an app, a document online, but have a place where you will put your writing. Even if it's a pile of sticky notes, just have a dedicated place that this is where you put your ideas, your pieces of sentences you come up with, your outline, whatever you want to do. Just have a place and just start. Just start getting in the habit of saving scraps of inspiration, even words that intrigue you, in a dedicated place. By the time 15 years had gone by, I had quite a stockpile of notebooks and scrap papers and napkins and all of that stuff. But that's the most important thing. You're never going to finish if you don't start. If you have already started, or even if you haven't, I cannot recommend highly enough this fantastic book. It's called No Plot, No Problem by Chris Beatty. And anyone who is struggling to try and finish the project they started with writing, or to start writing a book, or has ideas, wherever you are in the process, get this book. Just get this book. This is the reason that this exists, because I was about, I don't know, 8 years in, just, struggling along. There were years where I didn't even touch my computer to write. I mean, it was rough. And then I found this book, No Plot, No Problem. It's a low stress, high velocity guide to writing a novel in 30 days. And Chris Beatty is the founder of National Novel Writing Month, which I think is November, but it doesn't matter. You can use this book to, any 30 days. And you just use this book, and he makes it very simple. He's very motivating. He really breaks down the process into just an easygoing kind of thing. So most writers, we all tend to get caught up in our perfectionism. We want to just have everything be perfect right on the page. And really, that's not how writing gets finished. Writing and editing are 2 totally different things. So just put your hands on the keyboard and start typing. I used the book, the No Plot, No Problem book, their 30-day format, to write the bulk of my novel, because it teaches you to just keep writing. And even if you go off on some weird tangent that you're just going to throw out later, it doesn't matter. You just keep writing, because the exercise of writing begets more writing, and it gets the juices flowing, so to speak. And so it doesn't matter if you're writing, if the quality is poor. Of course it's going to be poor. It's a first draft. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Just keep pushing forward. Just spew the words onto the page and keep it up. And just keep in mind always that writing and editing are 2 totally different exercises. And you can spend the rest of your life editing your novel if you want. It's the getting the first draft down on paper and finishing that is the hardest part. So it was very freeing working with this book. I did come up with some of my best ideas in using this process. And of course, I'll put links to everything I mentioned here in the description. And let's move on to number 3. Number 3, for writing inspiration. If you are interested in reading the classic, fantastic, wonderful, amazing book on writing and life, please check out Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. This is, a little paperback that probably most writers carry around with them. Um, it's just chock full of great tips on how to write and why to write and all of that stuff. And it really is a classic among writers. So give it a shot. Just, check out the free sample or something if you don't want to commit to buying it. I liked Anne Lamott's book because she gives some really good advice on writing stories based on your real life so that you don't get sued, for example. Just check it out. Number 4, just keep going. And yes, I realize that sounds as trite as the first one, start, but writing a book is not just writing a book. You don't ever have to let anyone see your writing in order to benefit from finishing that novel that you started. Having an unfinished book on one's computer is so common, and wishing you could write your story and then never starting is even more common. There were years, like I said, that I barely touched the computer, barely worked on it, and I just had such guilt over, I have this story, and I started changing the names, and the characters take on a life of their own. And so I had this group of people in the computer who wanted their story told, and I felt so guilty every time I would screw off and smoke weed all day instead of writing or whatever I was doing. But I knew that I had to finish it just to say that I had done it, that I was one of those people who had an idea for a novel, who mapped it out, who sat their ass down, and it took 15 years, but who gives a fuck, and wrote it and finished it. And, a lot of those 15 years was a lot of editing too. So I didn't spend 15 years just writing it. The editing is the fun part because you get to, as the time goes by, you become a better writer, and you, find more interesting words to use. And it's just a self-improvement, growth exercise that just, there is no comparison to writing your story. So, with saying that, I do want to say, of course, everyone that writes a book, wants to be on the New York Times bestseller list. Everyone that writes a book wants to be discovered, like the lady that wrote that absolute piece of crap, 50 Shades of Grey. I don't know if anyone has tried to make their way through reading 50 Shades of Grey. The movies actually made something beautiful and moody and atmospheric out of the absolute garbage that was published. I mean, I don't know if she self-published or I couldn't even make it through the first book, the halfway point of the first book. I didn't even get to the like S&M part because there was so many grammar and spelling and just mistakes, and the writing was just so high school. And that lady made a fucking fortune. So everybody wants to be that. Everybody wants to be discovered and, be Oprah's pet and have that sticker on their book that says Oprah's Book Club. And that's just par for the course. But you can't worry about that. You just have to write for the sake of writing a good story and for the sake of writing your story, whatever it is, whatever you feel called to write, just do it. You have to just keep going and keep your eyes on that finish line. And then number 5, and this kind of feeds into what I was just talking about, don't do it to get it published, because the books that get picked up by traditional publishers are so random and the process is so constricting that it can be more of a curse than a blessing to be one of those chosen few who have a literary agent and who have an editor. And, just because you get the agent doesn't mean they're going to keep you. Just because you get the agent and you publish a book doesn't mean it's going to go anywhere. So hanging your hopes on, being validated by the New York publishing world is not a reason to write. Just like hanging your hopes on winning an Oscar is not a reason to be an actor or whatever. If it works out for you that you get picked up by a literary agent and an editor loves your stuff and you end up on the New York Times bestseller list, then more power to you. Go for it. That's great. But nowadays, even compared to 2011 when I self-published, self-publishing is so easy these days. And there are any number of legit self-publishing companies that can walk you through that process. And I am not an expert in self-publishing, so this is not the point of this video. I'm just saying keep an open mind and write it for yourself. And be aware that in the traditional publishing world, you write your book, you send it to an agent, and if they like it enough to rep it, they're going to send you all these changes to make. So you make all those changes and cuts and everything, and then they approve it, and then they send it to an editor. And if the editor likes it, then they're going to send you more changes. So publishing it yourself, you get to publish what you wrote. Publishing it traditionally, a lot of other people are going to get their hands in the pot. So just be aware of that. Write for the benefits of writing your story, which really can be surprising. In the 15 years that I took to write my story, not only did I become a decent writer, I mean, 15 years doing anything, you're bound to get okay at it. And of course, everyone's first attempts are going to be a giant pile of cringe. That's the way it's meant to be. That is the law of nature. So don't let that stop you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good of a writer you are. You don't have to, qualify with anything. You are writing your story because you are the only one that can tell your story. So in the course of writing my book, this novel, which is a coming of age novel. I wrote it about my early life, childhood to 23 or so. I reconnected with my first love, who I had been out of touch with for over a decade. And that was the reason why I started writing this book. I wanted to get over my first love, which, the first cut is the deepest. And I figured I would just make my book be the love story. And then, as always happens, the characters take on a life of their own and it expanded and other things came into play. But through the writing of the book, I got back in touch with my first love that I'd been out of touch with. I started riding horses again after 15 years away from it. And I got back in touch with my childhood riding instructor after we had this epic falling out when I was a teenager, which was, a big part of my trauma. It was probably one of the most influential things that happened in my young life. And so through the process of writing the book, I got back in touch with her and this is all decades later. So I'm a different person now. And it really helped me put in perspective the stuff that had happened to me as a kid, because now I was able to put it in this one place and it sits on the shelf and there it is. I came to the realization through the writing of this book that certain people were no longer welcome at my table. And I wrote one of those letters that they tell you to write that you're then supposed to burn, except I mailed it to the person and cut him loose. And that was 20 years ago. Actually, 20 years ago next month. And it was one of the best things I ever did in my life to set myself free from my childhood trauma. And so those are just the tip of the iceberg, just a few things that would not have happened if I hadn't stuck it out to the finish line of finishing this book. And part of that was because I took so long to finish it. I was growing and developing and changing and, 15 years, that's a long time from your 20s to your 40s. I was 40 when I published in 2011. And whether or not my book was traditionally published really at this point is unimportant. I should say I did get 14 agents in New York read my manuscript and had nice things to say about it. All of them had nice things to say about it, which was nice because they love to tell you what a piece of crap your life's work is. But they also would say, oh, it's too long or it's too dark or it's too, the character is too this or too that. And at the time, this was like the late aughts. And so the whole New York publishing world was looking for the next Twilight, another terribly written pile of crap that made a gazillion dollars. So, though, of course, I wish I would have gotten the full ride and, made a ton of money, what's most important is that I finished this. And this book sits on my bookshelf, and anyone can go on Amazon and buy it at any time. That's the great thing about books, it's always out there. Um, and I often look over there and see it sitting there, and only I know the epic battle that I fought to live through the events in the book, but then to later write it all down and turn it into something beautiful and moving and a good piece of writing. Um, I fought and fought to get it done and finished. And the satisfaction and the pride that comes from finishing what you start, no matter how long it takes, really is just completely priceless. And so there is an article that I found on Medium called You Can Finally Finish Your Book. And I just wanted to real quick read a bit from that. This article is from 2021 and it's by Yasmin Turehi. I will link it below if you want to check it out. But the way she put this is just so right on the money. Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And writing a book is like a fast lane to exploring all the unexamined parts of yourself. You get to learn about what makes you fearful, how you think about and articulate yourself about a subject, all your neuroses, about what is good enough, and how you react to challenges. I think the most rewarding part about writing a book is not the writing itself, nor is it about the actual process of publishing or marketing the book. It's about who you become in the process and the confidence you gain in finishing something that so many people desperately want to do. Like I said, I'll link this article below so you can check it out. But that's really all I have for you today, guys. If you have always wanted to write a book, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. If you have any interest in my book, you're welcome to check it out on Amazon. It's available in all formats, and any of the other links below. Check them out, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much.